Adrian is the co-founder of the 1787 Network and is the chairman for the state of Florida of the Libertarian Party. Please welcome Adrian Wilder.
Thank you, everyone. Very excited to be here tonight and to be before you. There's a reason that all of us are here. And as I look around the room, I know there's a good number of libertarians, some Republicans, some Democrats, some independents, but there's one thing that we all agree on. And what we agree on is that we should be free to pursue happiness in our own way with only limited government interference. And that's what our guest tonight has been fighting for. His record as two-term governor of New Mexico is impeccable. He vetoed more laws, more bills, spending bills, than any other governor in U.S. history. And that wins him some props in my book right off the bat. Also, he, through attrition, he reduced the size of the New Mexico state governor by 1,200 jobs. But at the same time, the private sector jobs increased in New Mexico by 11.3%. So instead of having government jobs through stimulus and through bailouts and through shovel-ready, as you made such a good point of in the debate, shovel-ready jobs, Gary instituted policies as governor of New Mexico that stimulated the economy in the right way. He did it through removing the hurdles that are placed in front of businesses that prevent them from hiring. And of course, Governor Johnson is also a staunch proponent of individual liberties. He believes that government should just leave us alone. Don't take everything from us. Let us pursue happiness in our own way, so long as it doesn't infringe upon the rights of others. So, without any further mumbling by me, please welcome Governor Gary Johnson.
So I hate painting myself with a broad brush, but I am really fiscally conservative, and I guess I'm socially liberal. Socially liberal is the notion that government shouldn't be making decisions that I think only you and I should be making as individuals. I think I'm unique to, I'm running for the Republican nomination for president, and I think I'm unique when it comes to the whole group in that I have been an entrepreneur my entire life. I've paid for everything that I've had in my life since I've been 17 years old. I started a one-man handyman business in Albuquerque in 1974 and actually grew that business to employ over 1,000 people in 1994. I sold that business in 1999. Nobody lost their job, and they're doing better than ever right now. For me, money has always represented freedom, and it doesn't take all that much money to have your freedom, but that is something that I've accomplished and allows me to be here right now, doing what I want to do when I want to do it. I'm also an athlete. I've been an athlete my entire life. I still actively compete in mountain biking and road biking and ski competitions. I've summited Mount Everest. I think you want somebody in this job who has the ability to hunker down and do what it takes. And if there's one thing I've learned in my life, it's that no matter what you plan on happening, it's not going to happen that way. That things are going to get in your way, and it's how you deal with the things that get in your way that really determine whether or not you're going to be successful or not. I had never run for any office prior to running for governor of New Mexico. The Republican Party in New Mexico was very inclusive. What they said was, we like you, we like what you've got to say, we want you to be part of this process. We want you to be included in everything the Republican Party does in New Mexico. but you just need to know that you'll never get elected. That it's not possible to come from completely outside of politics and get elected governor of New Mexico in a state that's 2-to-1 Democrat. It's not going to happen, but we're going to make you a part of the process. Well, I got elected. And I got elected talking about smaller government. I got elected talking about the fact that government has the ability to create this level playing field, that it shouldn't be a government for the few, it should be about government for everybody. As governor of New Mexico, I did distinguish myself, I think, in several categories. One of them was, I may have vetoed more bills as governor of New Mexico than the other 49 governors in the country combined. I vetoed 750 bills. I had thousands of line item vetoes as governor of New Mexico, and it made a difference. It made a difference when it came to billions of dollars worth of spending. It made a difference when it came to legislation that was going to tell you and I what I think were decisions that only belonged with you and I, not government. And I think government ends up criminalizing behavior by individuals that, you know what, it's a decision that belongs with you and I and not with government. And I think people are surprised to find out that the majority of legislation that passes is legislation that fixes prior law. So I signed plenty of legislation that fixed prior law, that because of prior law, there were problems with that law. As President of the United States, I am making 3 promises, making more promises than that. But I will tell you, as governor of New Mexico, I made very few promises, but I kept every single promise that I made. Running for President of the United States, I am making very few promises, but you can be the judge as to whether or not you think I'm going to follow through on the promises that I'm making. I am promising to submit a balanced budget to Congress in the year 2013. Now, I'm not promising to balance a budget, I'm promising to submit a balanced budget. Well, that's a 43% reduction in current government spending. And I make this promise because I believe that we're going to experience a monetary collapse unless we balance the budget. That's the only defense that we have from this country literally not becoming a country anymore. So I'm promising to submit a balanced budget to Congress. I am promising to veto legislation by Congress where expenditures exceed revenue. I suggest to you that, number one, if I'm elected President of the United States, what is that screaming to Congress? Isn't that screaming to Congress that we want a balanced budget? And I'm promising to veto legislation where expenses exceed revenue. So I'm going to have, they're going to have to override my veto, which they will do. But I suggest to you that spending will be less in that scenario, in this scenario that I'm laying out for you, than any other possible scenario that you can come up with. So we need to bring an end to printing money. That's what we need to bring an end to. Well, by just balancing the budget, we bring an end to printing money to cover ongoing expenditures. But that won't stop and may not stop the government from having to print money to cover the rollover in $15 trillion worth of debt that we have. I'm also promising to advocate on the part of throwing out the entire federal tax system, and replacing it with the fair tax. If you haven't checked out the fair tax, check it out. I am not doing this in a vacuum. Jeff Myron is my economics advisor. Jeff is a free market economist from Harvard, which is a little bit of an oxymoron. But Jeff also has a book on the bookshelves right now, Libertarianism, A through Z. But the fair tax, as the name implies, it's fair. It does away with all existing federal tax. Corporate tax, income tax, business tax, does away with withholdings, does away with the IRS, and replaces it with a 23% consumption tax. Now you're going, oh, you're going to add 23% cost to all goods and services? No, because currently goods and services contain 23% worth of tax. So over a very short period of time, this will actually be cost neutral to what we're currently paying. It'll also make American goods and services 23% more competitive when it comes to export. So that's really the answer when it comes to China. When you talk about jobs and job creation, if in a zero corporate tax rate environment, the private sector does not create tens of millions of jobs, I don't know under what scenario tens of millions of jobs get created. I talk about a 43% reduction in government spending. That means Medicaid, that means Medicare, and that means military spending. Doesn't mean Social Security. Social Security is not about cutting Social Security. Social Security, very simply, is a system that needs to take in more money than what it pays out. Implementing the fair tax, that will no longer be a withholding from your payroll check. That'll no longer be an employer match for Social Security. Social Security will come out of the proceeds of the fair tax. But to make Social Security solvent into the future, raising the retirement age, means testing, and means testing can be very fair. What did you pay in? What are you getting paid back out if your income exceeds a certain level? I think it can be very fair. You should get back the money that you've paid in. Back to fair tax, it really is not an issue. And then you could change the escalator that's built into Social Security from the wage index to the inflation rate. Medicaid and Medicare. As governor of New Mexico, I oversaw the reform of Medicaid in New Mexico. Changed it from a fee-for-service model to a managed care model, improved on the delivery of health care in New Mexico, and saved hundreds of millions of dollars. I believe that as governor of New Mexico, if the federal government would have given New Mexico 43% less money, put me in charge of the delivery of health care to the poor in New Mexico, that I could have done it with 43% less money if they would have taken away all the strings and the mandates that went along with their Medicaid money. I'm going to make the same claim when it comes to Medicare, that I, as governor of New Mexico, could have overseen the delivery of health care to those over 65 with 43% less money. Federal government does away with all the strings and the mandates associated with how to do that. Right now, whenever you talk about a 43% reduction in Medicaid and Medicare, everybody is, well, you can't do that. You can't cut that much money from Medicaid and Medicare. If we don't cut Medicaid and Medicare, if we don't make do with less in what I think can be a very efficient way, if we don't do that, I think we're going to find ourselves with nothing. And that's the alternative. I think we are going to experience a monetary collapse. There's no escaping the mathematics that go along with the spending that we're currently engaged in. A monetary collapse. What's a monetary collapse? Well, that's when the dollar goes from being worth something to being worth nothing. And it's not anything that the government is going to be able to say, 2 weeks from Thursday, there's going to be a monetary collapse, so go out and spend all the money you have on goods and services because 2 weeks from Thursday, your money's not going to be worth anything. They don't announce it ahead of time because it ends up being completely unanticipated, but it ends up being a bond market collapse. And in Russia experienced a monetary collapse in the 80s. Ruble went from being worth something to being worth nothing. What happened in Russia is they developed the most sophisticated barter system the world has ever seen. That if you worked in the chainsaw factory, you got 2 chainsaws for your work for the week. You literally got 2 chainsaws. You walked out of the factory and you bartered that in a very short amount of time for food, for clothing, for energy, for the necessities that you needed to live in Russia. I don't think that's a system that we want to have in this country. And by the way, that didn't include health care at all. Health care went away. Everything that was government went away. military spending in Russia went away overnight with the collapse of the monetary system. So we need to also reduce military spending by 43%, and we need to do that with the notion that we can provide for a strong national defense for this country and still cut military spending by 43%. And the operative word is defense as opposed to offense, as opposed to nation building. I was on record prior to us going into Iraq saying, where's the military threat? I know that there's talk about weapons of mass destruction, but I don't think they're there. And if they are, we have the military surveillance capability to see it happen, and if it happens, we can go in and we can deal with it. I thought if we went into Iraq, we were going to find ourselves in a civil war to which there would be no end. Afghanistan, I thought initially was totally warranted. We were attacked, we attacked back, and after having been in Afghanistan for 6 months, we wiped out Al-Qaeda. That was 10 years ago. We're building roads, schools, bridges, highways, and hospitals in Iraq and Afghanistan and other places in the world. Don't we have those same needs here? So, reducing military spending by 43%. That's taking the warheads, the nuclear warheads, from 2,300 to 500. Do we need to blow up the world 9 times, or might 5 times do the trick? When it comes to military personnel, those in uniform, that needs to be cut back. The support staff, the civilian support staff for those in uniform, that needs to be cut back. Our military presence worldwide, the bases, the fact that we have 100,000 troops on the ground in Europe. If we're talking about a 43% reduction, that would mean 57,000 troops instead of 100,000 troops. And I have a hard time understanding why why we would need 57,000 troops. And I'm talking also about Japan, I'm talking about South Korea. When you talk about research and development, for decades we've been talking about the fact that we need to be smarter when it comes to fighting future wars as opposed to wars in the past. Well, a lot of rhetoric, but there hasn't been any action to go along with that. Intelligence, which seems to be an oxymoron when it comes to the military, but can't we really be smarter? So the biggest threat to our national security is the fact that we're bankrupt, the fact that we continue to spend so much more money than what we take in. We're going to be left with no national defense unless we fix this. Currently, we're spending 52 cents of the worldwide dollar spent on military spending, and we're 5% of the world's population. Comparing that to China, they're spending 9 cents out of that dollar, which, by the way, I've done some calculations on the back of a napkin, is basically the amount of interest that we're paying them on the money that they've loaned us. I think that's a little ironic. And I don't think they're loaning us money to drop bombs on us. I don't see China as a military threat, but we should be vigilant to any military threats that exist. I'm the free market guy. I really believe in free markets. I think there's a magic to free markets, but let them work. When it comes to education, when it comes to energy, free market approaches are really something that should be embraced, and we move further and further away from free markets. Healthcare delivery in this system, in this country, is about as far removed from free market as it possibly could be. And if I could point at an issue that really differentiates myself from every other candidate that's on stage in the Republican Party, it's the issue of immigration. Look, candidate number 1 wants to build a fence. Candidate number 2 wants to build a parallel fence to fence number 1. Candidate number 3 wants to run a moat down the middle. Candidate number 4 wants to put barbed wire over the top of the fences. Candidate number 5 wants to electrify the barbed wire. And candidate number 6 wants to run drones or fly drones over the entire fence. Look, building a fence is not the answer. It would be, in my opinion, an incredible waste of money. It would be like building a fence around Tampa Bay and expecting that to keep you in or out of Tampa Bay should you so choose to get in or out of Tampa Bay. It's not going to work. When it comes to immigration, make it as easy as possible for somebody that wants to come into this country and work to get a work visa. Not a green card, not citizenship, but just a work visa, because we don't We want, I think, to have a background check so that we don't have criminals in this country working. And then when it comes to the 11 million illegal immigrants that we have in this country, let's set up a grace period where we can document those that are here, getting them a work visa. Taxes aren't an issue if you implement the fair tax, because whether you're an illegal or legal immigrant or visitor to this country, no one escapes being able to pay the fair tax. And then even Ron Paul wants to build a fence, wants to secure the border, but with the exception of Ron Paul, every single candidate wants to address the border violence with Mexico, which is drugs and drug violence. Every single candidate wants to answer the drug violence with more guns, as opposed to the root problem, which is the prohibition of drugs. So legalize marijuana, decriminalize drug use. Understand that this is a prohibition phenomenon at work at the border, which is that disputes are being played out with guns rather than the courts. 40,000 deaths south of the border over the last 4 years. If we can't connect the dots in this country with the fact that this is prohibition, that these are disputes that are being played out with guns rather than the courts, I don't know if we ever will. I would love to be able to answer any questions, any comments, any insults maybe that any of you have. I appreciate all of you here. I appreciate your activism. I think this country really is at a crossroads. We either fix it or we don't, and that's my intention here, is to talk about a message that, with the exception of Ron Paul, is really not being said. I hoped to be able to provide stereo speakers when it came to Ron Paul and delivering this message, but it needs to be a message of surround sound for it to actually take hold. And right now it appears as though the Republicans are going to nominate a candidate that I think is going to be very status quo and not get at the heart of any of these issues, which really puts us all in a position of not having a country going forward.
With your plan to implement the fair tax and get rid of the income tax, would a repeal of the income tax amendment be involved in that?
Yeah, and check it out, fairtax.org. That is part of the entire package, which is a proposal right now in front of Congress and was in 2007, yes, but it is repealing the 16th Amendment, allowing for the income tax. It's repealing that.
And that would have to be a process first before implementing the new tax system?
Yes. Yes.
All right. Though, of course, there's plenty of waste in militarism around the world, but to throw out the number of 43% reduction, that's going to involve just a lot of troops who are contracted for a certain amount of time to just fire them abruptly. How are you going to manage to do that?
Well, so then, no, it's not. So my experience as governor of New Mexico was that one of the promises I made as governor of New Mexico was that there would be fewer state employees when I left office than when I got there. And that was going to simply manage attrition. You can have that same phenomenon in the military, given that military service is limited to 2 or 4 year sign-ups. And I might be wrong on that, and please correct me if I am wrong. But I think it's simply managing attrition in the military also. So, and for that matter, I think that government cutback is very simply, and don't get me wrong, I'm not adverse to cutting government, but cutting government, slashing government requires congressional cooperation. In New Mexico, I got no legislative cooperation to do that. I always said, as governor of New Mexico, that I could have cut government by 1/3 and no one would have noticed the difference, but that I wasn't the dictator and that I couldn't do that. So I think it's very doable, and I base that on my experience as governor of New Mexico. A reduction in state employees in New Mexico had never happened year to year in the history of the state, and New Mexico celebrates its 100th year anniversary much less a reduction in state employees over an 8-year period.
Hi, Governor Johnson. I appreciate you coming to Clearwater, Florida. I volunteer for an organization called Get Out of Our House, Go. I'm not sure if you've heard of it.
No.
But we would...
Kind of speaks for itself, though.
Yes. We would really like to send some citizen legislators up there with you if you're elected to help you get this done. But my question is, what are your views on the Department of Education?
So I'm talking about a 43% reduction really across the board, and it isn't across the board because when it comes to the Department of Education, I am advocating abolishing the Federal Department of Education. And very simply, the explanation for that, because you're asked probably to explain that a lot, the Federal Department of Education gives every state 11 cents out of every dollar that every state spends. But that's Florida sending it to Washington in the first place at 12 or 13 cents, having it come back as 11 cents, and coming back with 16 cents worth of strings attached. We're going to give you 11 cents, but you have to do A, B, C, and D to get the 11 cents. Well, A, B, C, D costs 16 cents to deliver. So just get the federal government out of education and return it back to the states, just like Medicaid and Medicare. 50 laboratories of innovation and best practice, and that's exactly what you will have. And I think people are also slain to find out the Department of Education was established in 1979. And if you want to take a look at educational results since 1979, you know, that's been a decreased phenomenon. Give it back to the states. There would be some fabulous success that would get emulated. I also think there would be some spectacular failure. I will also tell you, as governor of New Mexico, I was more outspoken than any governor in the country regarding school choice, believing that we needed to bring competition to public education, and for 6 straight years in New Mexico, I knew it wasn't going to go anywhere, but I took on the debate and the discussion over a full-blown voucher system in New Mexico for 6 straight years.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Say you were President Gary Johnson, could you explain your Middle East policy as regards Israel and Iran? What threats you see there, what would be your reactions to those threats?
Well, first of all, I'm opposed to foreign aid. I think the notion that we're borrowing and printing money to the tune of 43 cents out of every dollar and then giving it away to foreign countries, I think that is a mistake. But when it comes to Israel, I have met with Netanyahu. I think it's a mistake that we should think we're going to dictate to Israel what is in their best interests. So I want to differentiate between foreign aid and military alliances. I think military alliances are key to the notion of us being able to reduce our military spending by 43% and have other countries take up that slack. So military alliance with Israel, I think, has been and will be in the future very key. And that it's a mistake for us to presume what is in Israel's best interest. Israel knows what is in its best interest and will pursue that. Iran. Is Iran a military threat? I think it's completely analogous to Iraq 10 years ago. No, it's not. But we should be vigilant to that military threat. And why is Iran potentially a military threat? It's because it's the unintended consequence of us having taken out Saddam Hussein in Iraq. That was their military threat.
We've done that, and now we're faced with a nuclear Iran, with a crazy leader.
Well, and so we should be vigilant. We have the military surveillance capability to see that happen if it does, and we shouldn't rule out any options if that, in fact, is something that happens. And I think it would be naive of us to think that Israel is not going to address that issue first and in our best interests.
But do you think Israel has the capability? Because that's an attack that would have to be hitting a lot of targets simultaneously to have a real effect, to put that program out completely as opposed to just delay it. And would you as president look at preemptive strikes on Iran or not?
Well, I think, first of all, that I don't want to misspeak in this process at all. But all those things that you just said, I can't find fault with anything it is that you're saying, meaning you're raising the question, should we? Well, first of all, you have to establish that there's a threat. it's my understanding that they're 5 years away from a nuclear device and that they're a decade away from the delivery of that device. Now, I realize that is something that is being debated. I wish I had the knowledge, that the intelligence to go along with the issue. I don't. But yes, we have to be vigilant against that kind of threat and shouldn't rule out any of those options. And again, I think it's naive to think that Israel won't be acting in our best interest to make that happen. And to my knowledge, they do have, Israel has the capability to do just that, to address multiple targets simultaneously. That's my understanding of Israel's military capability.
Now, on Social Security, if I understood you correctly, you would actually favor essentially the system that we have now, but maybe tweaked so that it's not going to go through the roof. Do you not favor individual accounts? Or?
Completely. I absolutely favor individual accounts. That should be one of those options. But if we go to a fair tax, it is a system that can remain in place and be solvent. And I don't think Social Security was ever meant to be the end-all. I think that it was meant to be a help for individuals in old age. And I think that it's a problem that is pale in comparison to Medicare, for example. I mean, Medicare is really the program that's got us buried, and Medicaid both.
I have a question with regard to this fair tax. It's my understanding it would be like a sales tax?
Yes, national sales tax.
Okay. In the case of items being resold on the secondary market, for instance, houses,
yes,
real estate, and automobiles, would that still apply?
No, it's to new goods, and there would be no business-to-business taxes. So, building a home as an example, the builder of the home would not pay a value-added tax for everything used in the construction of the home. That would be tax-exempt purchases from Home Depot that at the point of sale new would apply to that home. It's also one of the criticisms or questions regarding the fair taxes, isn't it regressive? The poor are going to end up paying more fair tax relative to their incomes. What the fair tax does is it issues everyone in the country a $200 a month prebate check. So each one of us gets $2,400 a year from the government that enables, it's kind of an unavoidable amount of fair tax that all of us are going to have to pay for food, clothing, shelter, energy, up to the point of the poverty level. So $2,400 basically enables all of us to pay the fair tax up to the point of the poverty level. Let me get back to also the notion that the fair tax would be cost neutral over a very short amount of time. Currently, a can of Coke that sells for $1 has 23% tax embedded in it. I mean, that's Social Security match, that's taxes that the business that Coca-Cola pays. Well, you enact the fair tax, and you know we live in a competitive world. So Coca-Cola is not going to have to sell their Coke for $1 anymore to make the same profit. They're going to be able to sell it for 80 cents and have it subject to a 23% tax, so that the Coke ends up still costing $1. I mean, and that, I think, will happen over a very short amount of time. And what does that do to American goods and services exported? It makes us 23% more competitive overnight. Goods and services that get imported into the United States would get subject to the fair tax, as would all of our goods and services.
Yeah, as president, how do you convince a stubborn Congress to repeal the Patriot Act?
Well, so as governor of New Mexico, and I said this time and time again when I ran for governor of New Mexico, I can't say that I can change the legislature's output. I mean, I can't coerce them into passing this legislation. Don't discount the power of being chief executive and what effect that has when it comes to being able to appoint the heads of all the agencies, to be able to appoint the heads of all the boards and commissions when it comes to rules and regulations. When it comes to rules and regulations, as governor of New Mexico, basically I controlled all of them. And they got better on a daily basis. So when it comes to implementation of the Patriot Act, don't discount how much better things could get overnight if first of all, as President of the United States, I would have never established the Department of Homeland Security, ever. That's the 750 vetoes that I rendered. If I would have been President of the United States, Homeland Security, veto. When it came to TSA, veto. Let's leave airport security to the airlines and to the airports, and I dare say today that airline security airport security would be as safe and less intrusive. And we did, the most significant thing after 9/11 was we beefed up the cockpit doors, arguably preventing an aircraft from ever being used as a missile again. And even more important, you and I as passengers, we don't sit by and watch bad behavior go down on the airline anymore. We don't. The underwear bomber was underneath a pile of people as a result of what he did. So making the Patriot Act better, there are a lot of rules and regulations that go along with the Patriot Act that if they don't change it legislatively at all, rules and regulations.
They're also using it to enforce drug...
Exactly. In the name of a drug-free America, we're getting our doors kicked down, and now in the name of a terrorist-free America, the same phenomenon. Our civil liberties are going out the window on a daily basis, and the newest proposal, newest piece of legislation that the military can now detain U.S. citizens. Wow, it's just getting so much worse, not better.
Kind of as a follow-up to his question about dealing with Congress, given the way that they conduct business, would you think it's fair to say that they are a racketeering, influenced, corrupt organization?
Yes. Yes. Enact the fair tax. I think maybe half the lobbyists in Washington go away. I share an outrage of over